And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin. I am the show's host, and of course, I'm also its creator. So, my guest for today is actually somebody whom I actually already followed for a very long time when I first started doing this. And of course, whenever I met somebody who seems to have a really interesting global citizens background, it's somebody whom I want to invite. But at that time, I was really, really new, I was really inexperienced. So, okay, let me build up my credibility first over time. And it has taken until 98 episodes, but I've done it. So, hooray. So, my guest for today is originally from the United States. She left after receiving a double degree, magna cum laude in international relations, language and society, and German language from University of the Pacific School of International Studies. She has since lived abroad in Europe and in Asia for over 2 decades and has been studying and speaking about global English communication in all of its form, and her work has taken her to 16 countries on 4 continents. So, as an outspoken advocate for global voices, amongst her notable accomplishments include raising awareness around micro inequities related to language and accent in international teams to help companies build unmuted communication cultures where every voice is heard. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce to you Mrs. Heather Hansen. So, how are you, Heather?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you. And you definitely didn't have to wait until episode 98 to invite me on here. I would have been happy to come much sooner. So I'm very happy to be here. I love talking about these things and our global experiences. So I think it's a great show that you're running here. So thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah. For all of her other accomplishments, it's already written in the description. If I say all of them, I will lose half of my broadcast time. It is so long and it makes me feel so. Uh, just to let you guys know, some of my viewers actually followed Heather, and in fact, to the point that I was like, "Huh, how come they are so much more engaging with her topics?" Seriously.
Oh, well, I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy to hear it. Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming today. Yeah, all right then. We will begin with the first question. So my first question to you is this. Firstly, how would you define home? So aside from your lovely family, after almost decades away from the United States though. Oh, and by the way, happy Independence Day to the good old USA.
Yeah, my family's having barbecues right now as we speak in California. Yeah.
Oh, lovely, lovely. So yeah, so aside from your loved ones, after over
Mhm.
2 decades away, do you still feel that home is still geographically United States, or any of your home in the Europe or even Asia?
Mhm.
Like you're
That's such a
currently
tough
in.
question. Yeah, it's
Thank
such a
you.
tough question. And for as you know, all global citizens know, it is a really hard question. And I've been in Singapore a total of 11 years in two stints. I was in Denmark 8 years in two stints. My husband's from Denmark. I have all my in-laws and family there. And my family is in California primarily and other parts. I think it's because when we moved here the first time, I was 26 years old. I ended up having both of our daughters here. That was where we had them. And I started my business here. And I felt like I kind of came of age here. I built my professional network. So everything that I feel kind of defines me, my work, my kids, my family, we built it here in Singapore. So it was actually quite difficult for me to go back to Denmark. We went back for 4 years and then came back 3 years ago. And that period in Denmark was much, much harder than I ever expected it would be. Even though we had family and all of that, and it was that reverse culture shock, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. But to just answer your question, I would say now for us, Singapore is home. We hope to stay here until the kids are done with school. And then we'll make some decisions then about if we stay more permanently or if we take another adventure without the kids. We'll see.
First off, allow me to thank you for that. Reason being is that growing up as a third culture kid, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to call Singapore my home for over 15 years, but there are those who do not have that luck. It's like they are so constantly moving around to the point
Yeah.
that they never regard a place as a home. So
Mhm.
the thing is that at a young age, you always want to be around friends, you always want to fit in, and after a certain period
Yeah.
of time, they are taken away to the point that it resulted in a certain kind of like unsettled kind of emotion.
Mhm.
So as a result, for you and your husband to make the decisions that okay, let the kids finish their education first, then we will decide what to do on that. So allow me to thank you for that.
Yeah, we're happy about that. You know, when we took them to Denmark, they were 3 and 5, and when we
Oh,
came back, they were just about 8 and 10. And coming back was a bit difficult. When we left, they told everyone they were from Singapore. They loved Singapore. It was all they knew. When we came back, they told everyone they were Danish. And they didn't want to be in Singapore, and it was so difficult. And you know, and still that age 8 and 10, I think, is a lot easier than trying to move as a teenager, or if they like moving them now at 11 and 13, we would really have to think that through because it's quite difficult. But I think we've always wanted to give them a sense of stability. It is, I can understand it must have been really hard for you to move around a lot. That's hard. And then you don't feel like home is anywhere. But I know the kids have settled in again now, and they're like, we don't want to go anywhere. We want to stay here till we're done with school. And we're like, okay, good. So we're on the same page.
lovely. All right. For those of you who are watching this for the very first time, Global Citizens is an online platform whereby I invited global citizens of multiple backgrounds. Primarily, I advocate third culture kids simply is because I am one. So I've invited, of course, DCK moms such as Heather, digital nomads, and expatriates. The main purpose of this is intercultural studies and awareness so that people actually understand that this life is not an extended holiday. It is a life whereby we have to adapt a new identity. We have to change how we speak. Our expectations is because we just want to fit in, but sometimes the environment might not be suitable for it. So yeah, earlier you mentioned on reverse culture shock. Yeah, have you ever dealt with loneliness in a new country? And what is your experience with reverse culture shock?
Yeah, so loneliness, absolutely. I think we all do when we move around a lot and have to start making all new friends again. And what's interesting in our lifestyle is that you can experience loneliness over and over again, even if you've been in the same place for a long time, because a lot of our networks are moving in and out. So I'm in a year right now where almost my entire social circle is leaving or has left. So I'm going into one of those phases again where it's like, okay, let's start over again and let's meet new people and let's go out and network, right? And it's hard, and it's really hard for the kids as well when their friends leave and they're lonely again. They finally made a good friend and then they leave because their family gets relocated. So living this kind of expat international lifestyle is very difficult. I've experienced reverse culture shock twice. The first time was when I was at university and I was living in Switzerland for one summer. It was my first living abroad experience all by myself. I was about 19. Yeah, just turning 19, lived and worked in Switzerland. So when I returned to the US, the reverse culture shock was really hard for me. And I remember like going to professors at the university saying, can I join the cross-cultural 2 class, the reverse culture shock class? I know it wasn't my study abroad, but I'm having all the symptoms. I really can't cope. And they're like, no, that's only for people after study abroad. And so I really got no help. And I was very, that was a low point for me. It was very, very hard for me to re-enter to the US. No one cared about what I did over the summer. Nobody cared how cool Zurich was. Nobody wanted to know anything about it. I mean, we can all relate, I'm sure. And then the second time it happened, and I mean, that was tough. I eventually did get over it. And then I went abroad for study abroad the next year, and I got that help when I returned. So that was a smoother reentry. But when we moved back to Denmark from Singapore, that was even harder. And that was probably the only time in my life I've gone into what you would actually consider a true depression, where I really, really struggled. And of course, I mean, this is actually the first time I've even mentioned this. Everything looks so good on your Facebook. We never would have guessed that you were upset there. But it was very, very difficult to go from a high energy city of 6 million people to move back to a small, that's about the size of my hometown in the US, where I came from, which we consider a small town. So the mindset is very different. The culture is completely opposite. I mean, Singapore and Denmark couldn't be farther from each other with a lot of their values and the systems and the way the countries work. So that was really tough. Those 4 years were really tough. After the first year and a half, we said, no, we need to go again. And even my husband had a really difficult time re-entering into Denmark, and that's his own culture. But for me, Denmark was home when we came to Singapore originally. So it was that kind of reverse culture shock plus normal culture shock for me, going back. So that was really tough. Yeah. And since coming back to Singapore, there have been some situations with certain social groups and things like that. Re-entering has also had its challenges in some cases. Yeah. So it's very real. And I think, we need help getting through that. Also, dealing with our kids, helping them through that, understanding that they're normal feelings to have. I'm also a little disappointed with myself in my period in Denmark. I think I could have done more. I think part of it was me just not wanting to accept it and not making it better for myself, if that makes sense. I don't know if that resonates at all with you and your times abroad.
Well, the thing is that firstly, I do appreciate that you actually acknowledge that your kids are. It's not easy, not only for your kids, but for yourself. The thing is that I get that feeling is because when I actually moved back from Singapore to Indonesia, it was not an easy. It's not an easy experience. Like as you said, it's a buzzing city of 6 million, or is it 7 million now? I'm sorry. I think now the
Somewhere in
population is
between.
yeah,
After
yeah.
the pandemic, I think a lot have left. So, we're back to around 6, I think. Yeah.
Okay, let's put it at 6. Yeah, after over 15 years of regarding the Lion City as my home, and if you see my profile picture, I actually celebrated SAF Day. I was in my uniform. I love the country so much, and it has become my home. Suddenly, I returned back to a place that's supposed to be my home, my birth country, my passport country, and I feel like a complete stranger. I don't know anything. I don't know the custom. I've shared this before several times, but my first ever hired vehicle ride, Gojek, is that the driver actually asked me within the first 5 minutes is, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from? Are you married? And have you eaten?" 5 minutes. I don't even know this gentleman, and I don't mean to be rude, but what I understand is that I thought this is just a typical transaction. I paid you, you get me to a location, that's it. Nothing else, nothing more. And of course, at that time, I didn't handle it well. But after a while, I actually got to know it's just because the people has a really deep way of intercultural communication that for them the way to bond is by being friendly. Of course, after a certain way of life whereby you are so used of doing it this way, it's completely different. So I kind of get where you're coming from. I really
Yeah,
get it.
and when you talk about the passport country, people always ask me, it seems like, oh, but you're American. Oh, okay, let's trade passports. I'd love to live in America. Don't you ever want to go back to America? And I think when I left in 2002, I was pretty decided. I had no interest in going back. I still feel that way. Maybe that will change at some point, but right now I'm still at the point where I'm like, no, I really don't have any interest in going back. And one of the reasons is because I left when I graduated university. I've never been an adult in America. I know nothing about renting an apartment, owning a car, having insurance. I know nothing really. And so anytime I'm in the States, even for a vacation, I feel like an idiot. I don't know anything. I go to Target to shop, which I love, by the way. I go to Target and I go to the checkout and they're like, do you have this kind of card? I'm like, what? Sorry. Like, what kind of card? No, no. Do you have this one? This one? I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, well, and then I try to give them my credit card. No, 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 you have to just swipe there, or you do this, or you do that, or you tap, or I have no idea. And they look at me like, what is wrong with you? Like, you are American. We can hear it in your voice. We can see it the way you dress. You're American. Why don't you know what's going on? And I feel so stupid all the time, every
Oh, don't feel
interaction.
that. Don't feel
And,
that.
and they're just like, what? And do you want to sign up for this? No, I don't live here. Oh, it's okay. You can use it anywhere in the United States. I don't live in the United States. And then they're just blown away, like, oh my gosh, well, where do you live then? And we're so nosy. So then I stand there like telling my life story with this long queue of people, while I'm just trying to pay and get out of the shop. So it's funny, when I look at it back and I think about it, it's funny, right? But in the moment, it can get so frustrating. Like, lady, can I just pay and leave? I don't want to be friends. I don't want to have a conversation. Just let me get it done. It's a little bit like
Exactly.
a check. Yeah.
Exactly. I need to get you in touch with Dr. Ruth Van Rieken. She has that same experience actually when she first moved back to Indiana.
Yeah, it's just hard. It's hard. And then, of course, with friends and family, our lifestyle, everything is so different. So trying to relate again, and I haven't seen any of the movies. Netflix has helped because now with Netflix, I can keep up on more of the culture. But up until the last few years, I would get back. I didn't know the music. I didn't know the songs. I didn't know the movies. I knew nothing. So it was really difficult to even participate in conversations. So you do feel a bit out of place for sure.
Huh, thank God for Netflix. Huh.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be having a talk regarding a generation called the Digital Culture Kids in
Oh,
August. So
cool.
yeah, that's going to be something interesting. It's
Yeah.
because the younger generations, which is after my generation, sorry, even after like the younger ones who are
Mhm.
born during the pandemic or need to experience education through social media and through digital
Mhm.
devices will
Mhm.
not be able to understand the difference between the digital world and also the reality of it. So that's going to be something interesting.
Yeah, definitely. My girls both just got their first brand new iPhones yesterday. So we're starting that journey. It's definitely a different world. And the way that they're connected and how they're connected to their friends, that also changes the loneliness and the culture shock a little bit because they still have so much contact face to face through a screen kind of contact, where when I first met my husband in 2000, he barely could use email. It was a totally different world. So being able to have that instant communication is really nice in a lot of different forms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or FaceTime. There are lots of ways for them to stay connected to people all over the world, which is nice. That's really been a great thing for them.
Yeah, the time whereby letters and emails were like the biggest form of communication. All right. Yeah. So I actually want to ask though. Earlier you mentioned that after if people see your social media post, people will always assume,
Mhm.
oh, it's a. We never thought that you actually have such a difficulty with it. We always thought it's like a rosy life kind of
Mm,
experience, right? So
mm.
I actually want to ask though, have you ever experienced a significant learning opportunity? People may call it a failure, but I don't like to use that term on this show. So because the thing is that you've been in 16 countries, you've been in 4 continents. So there's definitely a lot of different cultural experience to it though. Have for your
Yeah,
line of
yeah,
work.
that's true. That's true. Although, the all those different countries, I've lived for, over 6 months in about 6 or 7 countries, right? But the 16 countries are places that I've gone to work. So I've had really interesting experiences going to speak because as a professional speaker, I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. So some of my most interesting would be like Moscow, which was amazing, especially for an American that grew up towards the end of the Cold War. That was like a dream come true to get to go to Moscow. I got to go to Sudan, of all places, and a lot of people didn't want me going there, and that was amazing. And I was really faced with a lot of the stereotypes, the unconscious bias that we have that we don't realize we have until we come face to face with it. Realizing how safe it actually was there. First of all, everyone had me very scared to go. How friendly the people were. It was just completely different than anything I ever thought. But I mean, as far as like a failure or a cultural misstep, I think I've had many, to be honest, many small kinds of things. But the one that I look back on, and I mentioned it earlier, is kind of the bigger one, was not making a bigger effort, I think, in Denmark this last go around, that I could have done more, but I think in some ways I chose to wallow where I was. But that's also a big part of depression as well. We don't talk about that a lot, but when you are depressed, it's like, well, how can I make it better? I don't know. Like, you don't know. Nothing can be better. Nothing can change. Not everything is awful, and it's really hard to see your part in that. And so reflecting looking back, I think, I could have done more to be more social, to not be so isolated, there were lots of ways I could have helped myself a little bit more. But as far as kind of the cross-cultural mishaps, I think they happen quite a bit. I can remember I showed a slide in a Middle Eastern country with Wonder Woman, who's in her uniform and she's kind of like half naked. That was a bad choice. Like that can't happen. And I had been through all of my slides and I didn't even put two and two together that could be an issue. And I even knew that something like that shouldn't be shown. And yet still, it just didn't hit me when I went through everything. So the things like that, that's the one that comes to mind. But I mean, these happen all the time. Usually though, we can laugh at them, usually they're funny little things and you're able to explain like, oh, well, I didn't realize. Even things like sitting down at a table in Singapore with all the tissues on it, like wanting to sit down at a choked table, thinking somebody just forgot their tissues, right? I mean, I think I've actually done that. I know I was with friends one time.
You're not the first guest that I had that actually had that issue with that. At least I have 3 of them who had that.
Yeah, the choked tables, because you just think somebody forgot their tissues, or you think that they're from the restaurant or something, because normally you would have like a little thing with napkins on the table, in the States we do anyway. So things like that, they're just kind of funny things. They aren't really life and death or super offensive, but there are a lot of those little things that happen all the time. And then they kind of add up to that overall frustration of like, and I probably have the most of them when I go back to the States, to be honest, where I trip up and don't realize that, wow, I'm really a lot different than I was, and I just don't fit in the same way. So it's just about, I think, always having an open mind, never judging, never jumping to conclusions or having assumptions, right? You just have to look at everything with brand new eyes, as if everything is foreign all the time, and then see and be really observant so you can fit into what other people are doing, while still maintaining your authenticity, which is another huge conversation topic, right? Like, okay, if I'm always struggling to fit in with everybody, when do I get to be myself? And I think that a lot of frustration comes from that too, when we're trying to work our way into new cultures and groups.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is because we tend to I mean, for your case, since you are in your early adulthood, you grow up
Mm.
uh, adopting, in a sense, a different kind of cultures. For
Yeah.
me, I grew up with Singapore as my culture. So the thing is that when you come to a new place, is that you want to retain who you are, but at the same time, you kind of have to try to fit in. I mean, we
Yeah.
humans are social creatures, so it can be hard, I guess. But the thing is, I hope over time, as we get older, it becomes easier, or I don't know,
Mhm.
it's harder for a lot of, as you get older, I guess it's because a certain way of doing stuff and then suddenly you are told everything is wrong. So that's tiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, try having an Asian parents for that. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more positive. Shall we?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Heather, do you mind sharing with us though what actually started your career journey? How do you start at Global Speech Academy?
Mm.
And yeah, what has been the best experience of it? Like, because you need to interact with
Mm.
different individuals who
Yeah.
might not be native English speakers, but at the same time, that they are trying to do that. But the thing is it might not be an easy thing for them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, long story short, after my education, I immediately went to Denmark. That move was to be with my boyfriend, now husband. So that was a good move. It
Shout
could have
out
easily.
to Heather's husband. He just recovered. He just had a knee surgery, by the way. Speedy recovery to
Oh,
him.
thanks. Thanks. Yeah, yeah. He's upstairs in his office with his knee brace on and trying to get back to work. But yeah, I moved there for him. That was the original reason. Continued some studies. I started a couple companies. My first company was around translation and copy editing. I was doing a lot of writing. And then when the opportunity came for my husband's work to take us to Singapore, it was like, well, I've been here for 4 years. I could go anywhere for 2 years. I didn't know 2 years would turn into 8. But when I came to Singapore, I came as the trailing spouse, expat wife, which really doesn't fit me very well. I have a lot of
Sorry,
my
can I
own.
rectify something on
Yeah.
that? I don't, in this show, we call the trailing spouse or the expatriate wife as the fort holders.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
uh,
we,
we're
yeah,
also the
I don't,
CFO, right? The chief
I've
family
openly
officer.
said,
Yeah.
I've always said it openly, I'm a major mommy's boy, so therefore, I don't like the term to be used on my
Yeah.
mother.
And
So,
you know how much work we have to do. It was me selling the house, packing the container. Well, he was off already starting his job. He was in Indonesia when I showed up in Singapore, and I found the new apartment and I moved us all in. He showed back up from Indonesia like, well, this is a nice place, all our stuff in place. This is the stuff we do constantly. But yeah, so not very easy for me when I first came. Although I had already been hired before I left to run courses for Singapore Airlines pilots. So I was hired by a language school communication firm to be the trainer for about 1,800 Singapore pilots. We ran the course for over a year, and they came in twice a week, groups of 25, and we put them through this program in English articulation and how to do good public announcements. Now, this was way back when, right? So I take no credit or responsibility for how they sound now, but so that was how I started. I started doing some one-on-one coaching through that company for different high-level leaders. And after about a year, I realized, I'm kind of doing all the work for this, but I'm getting a very small payout. And what if I start my own company? So I started networking, and that was the first thing I did. I joined a bunch of associations. I started networking, meeting my own friends, building my network, and started up my own company. And that was in April of '07. And since then, we've been running. It's gone through a couple different names, but the same company, Global Speech Academy, and it's grown and morphed and changed. But my focus has always been on global communication. And the best part of it, and of moving to Singapore, was that it opened my eyes to truly international English and what that means, because there's a huge debate around the world, and we have this really great divide between the native and the non-native speaker. And I don't really agree with it. Technically speaking, Singapore is considered a non-native English speaking country, which is a little bit ridiculous for anybody who lives here, because everybody speaks English. Everybody's educated in English. The business world is English. Government's English. Everything's English. So why is this not
in
considered
fact,
an
in
English country?
2006, there was a campaign called
Yes.
Speak Good English movement. I actually it was my second year in Singapore. I remember
Oh,
it really well.
yep. So we moved here around the same time, because it was '06 when I came, and the Speak Good English movement was huge. And I thought, first of all, what is good English? And it was considered, the British English, perfect English, received pronunciation variety that only 5 million people in the world speak, by the way. And that started just questioning all my assumptions around English. What is good? What is bad? What is perfect? Is there a standard? There is no standard. And so Singapore really opened my eyes to that. I was coaching a COO who told me, I was saying, do you want to look at any grammar? I'm hearing some things. And he just looks at me and goes, I don't care about my grammar. No one cares about my grammar. As long as they can understand me, that's good enough. And it was like a knife in the heart for an English teacher. I was like, are you crazy? Like, we have to fix this grammar. But he was absolutely right. And it was like overnight, I took everything off my website about grammar and perfect English and speaking like a native and all of that BS, because it's not reality. It is not the reality of how we use English in the world. And I will still have teachers based in the US fight me up and down about this. But it's like, unless you've been here and understand it, it's very, very difficult to see. Um, so, so that has been by far the biggest gift of moving here, is to understand and watch and see how people use English as a truly common language, a lingua franca within Singapore and in their associations outside of Singapore. And Singaporeans are the best I've ever seen at switching between, the colloquial Singlish to a more standard variety of Singapore English, which we can all understand. The way they speak to me is completely different. They can be talking to me in a conversation, then turn to the person next to them and speak in a completely different manner. And it's amazing. And I love it. And that's what has influenced my work more than anything else in making it my mission, really, to talk about this idea of bad English. Everyone comes to me, my English is so bad, fix me. So you're not bad. You don't need to be fixed. You're not broken. this is the way we speak in the world, and it's time for us to meet each other halfway and in the middle. Both, people from the US, UK, Australia, the typical native speaker,
Queen's
making
English, I think it's called.
concessions. Sorry?
I think it's called Queen's English for the
Yeah,
UK,
the
is it?
Queen's English in the UK, Queen's English or RP, the received pronunciation. Even the Queen's family doesn't speak the Queen's English anymore. So things have really, really changed. And the non-native speakers outnumber the native speakers 5-1 these days. So why are we trying to fit them into this box of perfection based on old textbooks from the colonial days when the world is completely different? Like, let's just start being more inclusive, right? And listening to different accents, learning to understand them, tuning our ears. So anyway, that's my soapbox. So I don't want to take all of the time for the rest of your questions. That would by far be the best thing that happened to me in coming here. It completely opened my eyes to a new way of thinking about language and global communication.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first off, take that to my former English teacher who actually criticized the way I speak years ago. So growing up in Indonesia, my main influence of English is actually through all the old cartoons and of course pop cultures. And I don't know if it's something could be considered valid. I actually used to imitate Dwayne Johnson when he's speaking, when he was still a wrestler. So yeah, that's how I actually learned to speak. So back then, that's how. And as a result, I retained a certain level of what people like to call a slang, which is because they assume you're to imitate an American English, American accent, but the thing is, it's not. I just have a really deep voice, so this is how I know how to speak, guys. I don't try to sound pompous. It's just the way I speak. So it's really interesting nowadays that for people to need to accept for the different levels of accent, the different form of variety of the way we converse in English. Earlier, you mentioned on the need to meet up halfway, right? How do you feel that this could be facilitated?
Well, I think we need a lot more training in it, and we need a lot more people talking about it. I'm seeing more and more and more recently, just the last 6 months in the news, global news, British, American news. There's been a lot more coverage around this idea of the bad English, or how do we overcome that? Also around accent bias and the unconscious bias we have around linguistic issues, accent issues. So that's coming along. We need these things officially included in diversity and inclusion policies by companies. That will be a big step in the right direction. And there are a number of companies who are starting to work on that. And we're seeing more being talked about globally around that. But then in addition to that, I think that we need more training to raise awareness around this, about and I talked about this in my TEDx back in 2018 as well, that we need a shift from accent reduction, which is the typical training. Oh, my accent's bad. I speak bad English. Fix my accent, to accent recognition, where we talk to people about how can we better understand and identify other accents and understand them and accept them, so that there isn't so much frustration around, oh, I can't understand this person. Well, you're not trying to understand. You really aren't. And all it takes is tuning your ears. It's like a code that you just have to figure out. And the more you know about that person's native language, the more you know about how languages work. It's really simple to start understanding that code. And when you're around those accents more and more, it becomes easier and easier and easier. I mean, it's just like moving to Singapore. At first, it was quite difficult for me. I wasn't really prepared for how different the English would be. And after 2-3 months, it was like, oh, I could understand everyone. I could go to the hawker center. I could talk to the taxi drivers. I could do a lot, but it was difficult in the start. And some people get frustrated with that and put it on the other person. Like, I'm the English speaker. You need to speak in a way I can understand. Well, we need to turn that around and say, let me listen in a way that helps you to speak, right? And let me be more considerate and understanding. But I think we're lacking a lot of training around that. And that's something that I've been working towards doing more of with a lot of companies. So if you come to me as someone who needs help with their accent, well, let's also look at the other side and train the other groups in how to better understand different accents as well. All of our companies are so global now that it's definitely training we can all use.
Absolutely. The thing is that for those who actually feel demoralized in a sense, if your accent is not perfect. Please take note. You guys speak a lot more languages than somebody who is only a born native English speaker. You should be proud of that. There's nothing to be
Mhm.
embarrassed about it. It's just it takes time. It definitely is not easy. But the thing is that as long as people understand you, even though you retain your accent, then it's fine. Once
Mhm.
I don't see any issue about that. I actually have something to share about that too, because for years I actually tried to get rid of a certain Indonesian or Indonesian accent. It's
Mhm.
because I was not per se embarrassed, but the thing is just that back then when I was growing up in Singapore, there was always that emphasis to always speak properly, and there was an incident that whereby I actually benefited me when I actually speak properly. So okay, it works for me this way. So okay, let me keep retaining it. So as you get older, you kind of realize, actually there was nothing wrong in the first place. But the thing is because of the way that we perceive things and what is being promoted to us, then we are not able to accept the beauty of something that people may consider imperfect.
Mhm. And this is one of my worries, with the next generation coming up, because they're so involved with all the digital, talking about the digital adolescence at this stage. They're on TikTok, they're on YouTube, they're consuming primarily a lot of American content, and their accents naturally adopt that kind of
Absolutely.
English. And what if we all grow up all sounding American? I mean, that would just be such a shame. It takes so much beauty out of the diversity of the world. And so I do wonder about that. Where are we going? As far as language is concerned and accents, and then on the opposite side, we have a lot of technological advancements with AI and natural language processing. We have translators we can now stick in our ear, and I can go to Japan and have that in my ear and speak English and they hear it in Japanese. They speak Japanese, I hear it in English. On that side, it makes me wonder, maybe English won't be as important moving forward. We'll finally get to speak with our authentic voices and be heard in that way. But there's a long way to go before the technology is that good. But I do fear that because the more I hear international kids, the more American they sound. But it's also interesting when you look at international schooling, because international schools all over the world are producing kids with a very typical international school accent. And it trends slightly American. So it's going to sound more American than British for some reason. But when we bring all these international kids together with all these international teachers, somehow they form their own variety of English. I would love to do a PhD on this and just study it, because it's really quite interesting, and you can identify those international kids, and it's very similar as well to your accent. Although I don't know if you were in international schools or you went into the local Singapore.
I went to both international and local school,
Yeah.
but I went to an international school when I was in Indonesia. I went to a local school in Singapore.
Okay. Yeah, but your international time in Indonesia, and then all of your movie watching and and Johnson impersonations. That speeds it along, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, it makes me wonder where we're going with that, and we'll see. I mean, my kids seem to have different accents every day, so depending on their mood and who is teaching them that day, so they're always, and they play with them, and I mean that's okay, right? So yeah, interesting.
Mind if I ask, how is your English?
Oh, it's not that good, to be honest. It's not very good. I do the basics, but I'll tell you why. I've always felt I don't know. I don't, I feel like I'm putting it on, right? It doesn't come naturally. I feel like if I'm doing it, it comes off as mocking. And that's what I don't like. So I try to avoid using it unless I'm truly trying to communicate authentically. So I don't joke around with the language a lot, because I just feel like it's not my place to do that. I feel really bad when I see a lot of professional speakers come from the US or the UK and they get up and like, hi, Singapore, and how are you doing? And then they like throw in a few laws and they use can a couple times, and everybody's sitting there like, oh, come on, like really. It's like when people try to imitate a Canadian and say a at the end of every sentence. It's not how they really speak. And so I have purposely stayed away, I think, from using Singlish because I don't want people to feel that I am mocking
Mocking.
mocking the language. Yeah. But I do enjoy reading about it. I know a lot of it. I understand a lot of it, but I try not to use it unless I truly am speaking to someone, for perhaps my aircon guy. I'll tell him, oh, uncle, my aircon's choked. I'll tell him that instead of, oh, can you help me please? My air conditioner is clogged. And they kind of look at me like, what? So I've learned,
Uncle, I cannot use already. Don't know what
yeah,
happened.
uncle,
Okay.
can I use already? Choked, whatever. Then I will use it when I'm being authentic and I'm truly trying to communicate and I'm trying to make it easier. But if I know that somebody has a level of standard Singapore English, I know that's what they expect to speak with me, and so I don't do that. But I know a lot of people who do very successfully. So I don't know, but that's a spot that I'm still a bit undecided. After 11 years, I'm still undecided how to tackle that, or if Singaporeans would appreciate me doing it, or if they would feel that I was being a bit pompous about it and mocking them.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Earlier you mentioned on your kids' accent changing, depending on who's teaching them. Yeah. So I want to ask how is your relationship with you have two daughters, yes? One is 11, one is 13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually want to ask, how is your relationship with your daughters? And because this is something that I want to ask on parenting, is because
Mhm.
in the West, there's always the belief that as you get older, you are more mature, you can make your own
Mhm.
decisions. But
Mhm.
in Asia, the reverse of that is not on as you grow older on how you are able to make the decisions, but how you are able to contribute to filial piety or how you
Mhm.
actually take care. And in a sense, some people has criticized it as being more obedient to following the instruction or command of your parents. So I want to ask you on your parenting style on this.
Mm. Well, I think that we get our parenting style from our parents, right? So the way that we're raised is what we will typically pass down to our children. So I definitely have the very American parenting style, I would say, and influenced strongly by Denmark as well, since we lived there for a number of years. Um, but so definitely my kids, it's very much based on, do we feel that they're responsible enough to make the appropriate decisions? If they are, they're given that freedom. If they aren't, then forget it. And we trust you with a phone, you break it, that's it. Like those kinds of things. Yeah, they're getting to an age where this is coming up a lot. 11 and 13, it's like, whoa. Yeah, and they just turned, my 13-year-old just turned 13 last month. And it was like, she thinks she's an adult now and she can make her own decisions, go wherever she wants. She's like, I'm going to go meet a friend and we're just going to ride the city bus all day all over Singapore. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? No, you're not. Like, what are you thinking? And I mean, see, and then you also see that crazy sense of safety that they have living here, where when I was 13 in the US, I would never step on a city bus ever. I mean, I would be scared now to be on the public transport. It's not as normal unless you're in the big cities. That's different. But where I grew up, we were never on public transport. I would have never been allowed to do that on my own. I was driven to school and home every day. I was, it was very controlled. And very much based on, a bit of the, I would say, in my family in particular, there was a bit of that Asian parenting from the sense of get good grades, be a top performer, be the best in your class, always do your best. And that was a very strong value we had in our family. Always do your best. I don't feel that it was a pressure, though. That was very self-driven as well. And I try to impart that in my kids as well. So I do have a bit of that. I expect them to have the grades where they need to be giving their best effort. They aren't top of the class. They aren't. They're pretty much in the middle.
Yeah, it's overrated. It's
You know.
overrated. Just
Um,
get in the middle and learn some more stuff. As long as
and,
you
and
pass, it's
and I
fine.
think
Enjoy your childhood.
yeah, and I think that that's kind of the difference with me as well. Is I've been through that whole process of being the top of the class, getting the best grades, going to a good school, getting. And it's like, really, how much of that was useful or necessary? They're forced to learn how to handwrite. I'm like, you're never going to use that. forget it. Like, I don't care if you fail handwriting. Like, let's focus on the stuff you're going to use, you
Yeah,
know?
I haven't used
So,
algebra since I passed it years ago.
yeah, I did all the mathematics and I'm the worst in the family. I finished calculus really early in high school. I was way ahead in my schooling and I haven't touched it. I'm the worst at doing math in my head in the whole house. It's like, I don't know, ask someone else to help you with math. I can't even remember how to do it. Um, so I think that our generation now raising the next one, I think that maybe we're, or maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I feel like I, in any case, have a different perspective where I'm like, let's really think about what's going to make you successful in life. And a lot of what you're learning in school isn't necessarily going to be the game changer. Let's get you financial literacy skills. Let's get you, social skills. Let's teach you how to make your own breakfast. I have a friend who was so surprised. She visited me when we went back to Denmark. My 4-year-old comes down from upstairs. We're all still asleep. My friend was already up in the kitchen having tea. My 4-year-old comes in, opens the fridge, gets the toast, puts toast in the toaster, makes her own breakfast, butters her bread, does the whole thing. And my friend's sitting there like, wow, because, okay, when we were here in
You can make your
Singapore,
own food.
yeah. And I mean, when we were here in Singapore, they had a helper and, the helper would help them with everything. But it was still always really, really important to us that they have individual responsibility. And it's like, no, the helper doesn't work for you. You don't get to boss them around. You don't get everything you want. You can help. And so there's still a lot of that individual responsibility in our home for sure. And them kind of proving where they are at in the grander scheme of things before they're given more freedom and opportunity. But I am very strict. They said in Denmark, especially, I was the strict mom, me and one other girl's mom who was originally from Sri Lanka. We were the strict moms.
Yep.
We're
The
very
Asian
strict
moms.
and we had very specific rules around, no iPads, no this, no that, and where are you? Who are you with? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm still like that. So I know I am quite strict, but with that, I think allows them more freedom when it counts. At least that's what I hope. And I hope they'd agree. I think we do have a very close relationship. We're a very close family. We prefer to just be us, I mean, we're very close. So it works so far, but I fail every day anyway. So, we just do our best. We do our best.
Well, the thing is that with freedom, it comes with a sense of responsibility. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can handle it, yeah, you have all the freedom
Mhm.
you want. But the thing is
Mhm.
that how are you in handling what's going to happen if, let's say, it didn't work out the right way? Or maybe uh, if any one of you are Singaporeans are watching this, or if you may not heard of this, there's a phrase called touch wood, means hopefully it didn't happen. Yeah, whereby you hurt somebody, you don't want that to happen. But if you are able to handle the responsibility, then by all means, have all the freedom you want, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
Sorry about
funny
that.
little note on touch wood. In Denmark, in Danish, it's called 7-9-13, and you knock under the table 7-9-13, and that's the same as touch wood. Isn't that
Oh,
funny? I know.
hmm,
So I thought I'd just share
huh,
that intercultural tidbit. Yeah, funny.
that's cool.
I have no
Seven,
idea what
nine,
it comes
13.
from. 7 9
Huh.
13. Suni
Maybe a
Tran, and you
Singaporean who live
tap and hop, hop,
in
hop.
them.
Yeah,
Ah, okay. That's new.
funny. Mm-hmm.
Huh. That's something to
So the
take
way
note
that
of.
idioms
Okay.
don't translate, right? Idioms just don't translate well. So that's another thing we can do in global settings. What you just did was to use it and explain it, right? And that's another skill you've developed being global that a lot of people aren't aware of. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I didn't host this until to 100 without learning a thing or two.
that's right.
Okay. Yeah, I actually will be having two more questions. One of them is actually a little bit more serious, actually.
Mm,
Recently in Singapore, there's a embarrassing case whereby a lecturer called out a biracial couple for some reason. I don't know why it happened in the broad day, in the middle of the road, in the middle of the night, though. So, for your experience, though, how do you feel being a Caucasian born has
mm,
impacted how others perceive you? And also, what do you feel could be done in order to, in a sense, facilitate acceptance
mm,
on cultural diversity?
Wow.
I always felt that Singapore has actually done it spectacularly, but I didn't expect that
Mhm.
there's something like this could happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we can blame it on the pandemic, but the thing is that it shows that this thing has already existed for a while. It just needs the right kind of platform to actually allow it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And here in Singapore, I think we've seen that racial tension building, especially throughout the pandemic in a lot of different dimensions. And even over the past years, there's a bit more anti-foreigner sentiment in Singapore, and we've definitely felt that shift and that change, and even from the government as well, tightening restrictions on our employment passes and making it just much more difficult for us to operate. As foreigners in Singapore. So there's definitely a lot of that happening. As far as my personal experience here, I would say that being Caucasian in Singapore is a very, very privileged status. We like to believe that the colonialism has passed, but there's still so much of that mentality left. I mean, I've said it many times. There's no way that I, as a 26-year-old, could have just walked in to the offices of CEOs and top leadership at multinational companies and been accepted right away and been their coach at age 26. I think that being Caucasian had a big part of that. I had a foreign education and an American education and this and that and the other. And okay, people generally always thought I was older than I was. I think there's a lot of that as well across races, that a lot of local Asians tend to think I'm probably 10 years older than I am. And so when I was going in, they were probably imagining I was mid 30s, but I was only 26. I really didn't have a lot of life experience. And I was sitting at the table with people that I doubt I would have ever sat at the table with if I was back home in the States. Certainly not in Denmark. They wouldn't have looked at me twice. Yet here, I was put on a pedestal. And it was like, there's something wrong with that. Like, why am I able to charge double what the local trainers are charging? Because what? Because I'm foreign? And because I'm Caucasian? Is that also part of it? Or, can the foreign Indians charge what I'm charging and do what I'm doing? I think there's a lot of this happening. There's a lot. And especially because I was in the field of English language, that being Caucasian fits that picture as well. So walking in as a Caucasian native English speaker put me at the very top of the list. As well as if we start to consider things around gender biases with language and communication. And I think being female probably helped me in some ways as well. So there's definitely a very strong hierarchy in Singapore as far as who we trust, who we listen to. This is definitely changing, and it's changing quite quickly. And the pandemic has pushed that ahead even farther. And so yes, I mean, it is a serious issue. How do we change it? I mean, gosh, that's a huge, huge question. I think that we're well on our way in Singapore to changing that. I think that, we are evening out as far as those differences, but even within the local culture, we see that hierarchy of culture. Take the Caucasian element out. We see even in the local cultures that there's quite a degree of difference in how people treat each other based on race. But we love to believe it's a multicultural melting pot. We want it to be that. And we love to be able to see, a Muslim mosque next to a Catholic church, next to a Hindu temple. That's what we like to see and believe. But I think we all know on the ground that it isn't quite that way. And there's a lot of inequality and bias playing out in our business lives, as well as our social circles. So it is a big issue. I'd agree with you on that.
By the way, the scenario you mentioned on a mosque and a church beside a temple, it actually existed. It's in Bali.
It does. Yeah. Oh, in
Yeah,
Bali.
it existed.
Well, I thought we
Yeah,
also
there's
have it
such a.
here.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
thought
There,
Little
of
India,
course,
we
it
also have
existed in
that. Yeah.
Singapore, but yeah, in Bali, there's also such a thing. It's quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
fantastic to see that, coming from America, where there's been just so much around those kinds of things. It's just really beautiful to see that, right? But it doesn't erase what's going on in the interpersonal relationships and the way society functions, right?
exactly. I always feel though that in a sense, the experience of handling a global citizen's life could be applied in a sense in this setting is because
Mm.
I always believe three things can unite people: food, stories, and a common form of tragedy. And as a bonus, if you are raising teenagers, yeah, you have a lot of things to talk about. The
Yeah.
thing is that why I do my show in this setting, with minimal. I've been criticized on this quite a lot of times, is because I have minimal editing, I have minimal settings, and I'm not. You're not gonna confuse me with Ellen DeGeneres or any one of the talk show hosts which has such a high energy. I speak in a monotone voice, in a sense, is because just to let you guys know, for a cultural experience, there's an Azan beside my house.
That's what
Yeah,
we
there's
could
a
hear.
great. Yes, thank you. Yeah, the reason being is that I want people to actually understand when you just sit down, when it's just a simple setting, when you just talk to somebody,
Yeah.
you actually learn that you may have a lot more in common with them. Maybe it's done differently, but in a sense, it has the same kind of intention. So that is why I
Mhm.
always do it in this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Underneath it all, we all want the same things, no matter where you go in the world. We all want to be safe and loved and have our families be safe. And, it's the basic human essentials. And we are all the same underneath it all. It's just the way that we present and behave that might be a little bit different. But I think we are truly trying to reach the same goals in the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. This is going to be my last question for you, Heather. So, if you could create a character or even a show,
Hmm.
um, dispel the stereotypes that you're the life that you have been, or it could be something for example, what the company is doing, whereby to actually advocate global speeches. What would it be?
Wow, that's tough. I mean, yeah, one option would be something like The Voice, but for public speaking. So have people turned around. There's no bias. The problem, though, with that is that there's still accent bias, even if you aren't seeing and visually seeing the person. There's a lot of accent bias going on if you were to listen to someone tell a tale or a story. But something around that could be really cool, or something that maybe followed someone through that reverse culture shock phase, because I don't think we put enough attention there of how difficult it is. And it seems like, well, the fairy tale's over. You go back to your home country, and there's no help. There's nothing's available. Family doesn't understand, and you're lost. So a real honest depiction of following someone through that process, or several people, would also be a cool show idea to introduce that concept to people, so they can better support their friends, family, loved ones when they return from placements in different countries, even if they're just on vacation, to know how to interact with them, and
Yeah,
also help people
you
that.
can't read a certain currency. By the way, sometimes it's hard. You don't
It's
know what
hard.
number is.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
All right.
those would be some ideas maybe for good new shows on Netflix. Call me Netflix. We'll work it out.
Yeah, I might recommend that to some of my alumni who are in the movie industries.
There we go. There we go.
All right. Yeah. Okay. That's actually all the question I have. I actually always want to end. I want to end my show with the term gratitude. So I actually want to ask you is that what have you been most thankful of for your life as a global citizens? And just to make it fair, maybe there is something that you wish you could have done differently back then, or to make it a better experience.
Wow. I would say overall, the last 20 years have been pretty positive, all the experience that I had. And I'm just grateful I've been able to experience it. When I think of I think only something like 30% of Americans even own passports. And that's just mind blowing when I think about the international experiences I've had and the people I've been able to meet. So the fact that I, just was in the right place at the right time, I guess married the right man whose job took me to Singapore, but also that I took those first leaps. I wouldn't have met him if I hadn't studied German. I mean, if you go back to like, what's the very first decision in your life that might have spurred all of this? It would be choosing to take German in high school. So I'm very, very grateful that I chose to take German in high school, because if I hadn't made that one decision when I was about 13 years old, I'm not sure my life would have taken the same course, because I can track everything back to that one decision in my life. So it's truly amazing when you start to look at your decisions as well. You could make a choice tomorrow that could change the whole track of your life moving forward. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for Frau Driscoll teaching me German for 4 years in high school so that I could create this amazing life following.
All right. All right then. That's all the question I have for you. So yeah, are there anything else you want to mention, maybe?
No, just thank you for having me. This has been really fun. I love to chat about these kinds of topics. And I guess just if anybody's out there who is worried about their English or their bad English or think they aren't good enough, please just do check out my TEDx. I hope it's something that encourages you to speak with your authentic voice. And we need a lot more global voices in the world. So take every opportunity to speak up and share your message with the world. And that would be my final words for everyone. But thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. By the way, Heather's TEDx is called 2 Billion Voices: How to Speak Bad English Perfectly. This was actually in 2018. So I remember this quite vividly because at that time, that was actually when I first started following a lot of notable people in Singapore within the speaking community. All right.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
very welcome. You're very welcome. Yeah, so also a shout out for Mark Barnabas Lee, who actually wanted to watch this, and he actually left a like for the announcement, but he is unable to do it right yet. It's because he's working. But don't
Okay.
worry, the replay will be available in my IGTV, in my YouTube, and this very recording itself will be available on my Facebook post immediately afterwards. So with that, I end Global Citizens, episode 98. Is bad English the new good? So conversation with our global communication expert. Do stay tuned because I'm actually gonna hit my milestone of 100 episodes by the end of this month. So with that, take care everyone. Please stay safe. If you bye.
Bye.